podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. My name is Rob Hilferty, and I'm here with my co-hosts Daniel Quinn and Courtney Staples. On today's episode, we conclude our time in the prison subsystem that once was, what would our solar system be called? Do we have a name for our solar system? Daniel, you would know this. You're a science man.
Well, in computer games, in computer games, I always see it referred to as the Sol system. So I'm sure computer games are the best source of that knowledge.
Oh, you mean our solar system?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's called jail.
Well, yes. That is the fictional one. Yes, that's correct. But do we have one?
I'm pretty sure it's right. Sol. Yeah.
The Sol system?
But let me Google it.
Okay. This is all staying in, by the way. I just want to let you know.
Okay.
This is the kind of fun, dumb banter that I'm here for.
Wikipedia says, well, actually, solarsystem.nasa.gov says, our planetary system is named the solar system because our sun is named Sol, after the Latin word for sun, solus.
Y'all, you are listening to me learn in real time. I just want to say that.
Other systems, other stellar systems may not even have stars. So that's why.
Gotcha. Okay. Anyway.
So according to Wikipedia, other ones can be planetary systems, which are a set of gravitationally bound non-stellar objects in or out of orbit.
Interesting.
Yep.
The last we left off, after all that preamble, after learning what a solar system is, apparently, where we left off last time was we had a twist, and that twist was throw the story into the past or the future. Now, who wants to start us off by reconciling this twist? I feel like there is a lot that we can do with this twist in particular.
So mine is less the story itself and more parts of the setting, if that works. I was Googling about black holes and time distortion and all that, and found a bunch of articles about a study about the gamma rays that are released by stars when they collapse into black holes. And all the headlines are, of course, talking about how the gamma rays might reverse time, which is interesting. And I don't know if that's actually what the study said, because you know what science journalism is like.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was thinking,
unless it's coming from nature, you're never sure that it's actually what it says.
Exactly. So I was thinking that maybe this did happen with our star, but in those single areas where the gamma rays traveled through. So at random, when you're traveling through the system, there could be a streak of millennia old landscape on one of the planets, or kind of fractions of these ancient objects floating around. So basically relics of the past that were brought back because of these gamma rays.
Interesting. How does that, Daniel, jibe with science and stuff like that? I feel like
totally legit science.
I haven't heard of reversing time gamma rays before, but I'm sure there are weirder theories. I would have to Google it. But it's what I like conceptually in that is the idea that there could be these beams of energy that have created certain areas of the system that belong to an earlier time, or I don't know, or a window into that time. That's kind of cool.
Interesting. It's similar to the concept that I was kind of messing with when it comes to our twist, which is can you have essentially what's the equivalent of a solar flare but for a black hole with time? Can you have just a wave of black hole energy that rapidly ages or rapidly de-ages certain things? Because I was thinking that might be kind of interesting to see, especially on a planetary level where it's only one side or one portion of this planet gets hit with that, and then the rest of the planet is relatively fine. What would that look like? What does that's what I wanted to kind of explore. And again, I feel like we're getting a little bit towards the science fantasy, which I'm fine with. We're a little rooted in science fiction, but now with I didn't want to go with my original plan, which was time, essentially time traveling wizard magic, right? Where my original plan was to essentially have the future and the past be the same thing, where the people who left and like burnt out the sun are the same people who are coming back. So it's like this infinite loop that's happening. But again, it doesn't really make a whole lot of goddamn sense. So I wanted to go with something else, and I did. Again, I feel like this is less fantasy than infinite time loop, but that's what I wanted to get out there.
Yeah, no, I like that idea, and I feel like we could kind of BS it and say that because of the artificial and very sudden way that this black hole was created, maybe it's like unstable, which explains the flares.
Yeah,
like time distortion.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, you could say that it's. I was trying to read an article quickly about something close to what you might have Googled, but you could also say though that instead of gamma rays, like this is like, I don't know, some kind of frame dragging in space time caused by the creation of this black hole. So like there's like spindles of space time that are maybe like so warped that they're actually in the past, and so like it's almost as like a ray of this warped space time hits a planet and like pulls it into the past or something. That would be kind of weird, you know. If you wanted to keep it more, if you wanted to like try and push it away from science fantasy as opposed to like, you know, the Hulk got his powers from gamma rays, that kind of thing, you could do that.
Yes. Well, I was directly trying to avoid Hulk references, Daniel. Thank you. Yeah.
But I do see an article about which I'm wondering if it's something similar to what you read, that's talking about gamma ray bursts. Basically, they appear as if they're going backwards in time because of the conditions surrounding them. But I don't know what that means without reading this in depth.
Right. Yeah. I was trying to get through the study, but the language in there is pretty
incomprehensible.
Dense. Yes, a little bit.
Yeah. Turns out people have degrees in these things for a reason. Who
Weird.
knew? Yeah. All right. So we've got it's interesting to me that both Courtney and I were kind of fascinated by the black hole stuff. Daniel, what were you fascinated by with this whole twist?
I was thinking not so much of taking it literally, but the sense that because this we're talking about a whole solar system, which is an enormous space, and it's now disparate and broken apart because they don't understand the technology that's been left behind, and you've got basically prisoner gangs running things. I thought perhaps there are pockets of the solar system that simply have fallen into the past. Like we talked about some of them having mutated dinosaurs on them. You know, you could have parts of Mars that are colonized, but their society has forgotten what humanity is about, and it's run by, you know, barbarian hordes because they reverted back to that. Or whereas you could have, let's say, a space station on Neptune, which is now, because of Courtney, like just a hard core and not a gas giant, where they do retain like fragments of human civilization, and it's a big Cloud Bespin kind of space station, and everyone lives there and thinks of that as like their entire existence. So you can have the past and the future in the same system without them even knowing about each other, because to get between these planets is an enormous journey, which they may not even have the technology to use.
Jesus, Daniel. All right, sure. When you say that we can have this be in the future and the past at the same time, you're talking about relative technological states, correct?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to make that clear because I thought that you could also essentially say that, like, no, the past is happening in the future, man. Like that's like actually kind of what I was thinking about, where like time becomes inverted in on itself. You know?
I mean, I like your concept. I think could work if we played with, because if the people who are far outside the system, like that, when you deal with distances that far, the meaning of time is not really the same as what we think of as there being a past and the future. Because if you like, just the most basic concept of that is when we look back at the stars, right, in the sky, we're seeing what's happened relative to us billions of years ago, right? Like the light has just arrived
Right.
to us
Right,
from an
right.
insanely far distance. So it doesn't make sense to talk about the past and the future in terms of what's happening to people who might be where that light came from and where we are now, because there's a literal, it's literally impossible for them to be relative to them to be like comparable to each other. Like they're only relative to each other. So it's totally doable, but I have no idea how we would do it in this setting, because we're talking about one solar system, you know.
Huh. All right.
If we wanted to stick with something that's sort of science fiction-y and has an explanation. You know?
Well, let's kind of start there. What interesting stories do our twists and the reconciliations thereof allow us to do with this system? Like, that's kind of the question that I would like to answer first. Like, what kind of stories are you interested in telling with the twists that we've brought today?
I'm sort of picturing like being a person on a planet, talking about like our ideas, Rob. Being a person kind of on a planet struggling to survive, and then stumbling across this sort of strip of land that is like completely different from what I'm used to, and it's just that's how it was like centuries ago or millennia ago. And just how sort of startling that would be, and what that might bring out of a person to see that, because that to them would be an alien landscape, and maybe sort of a sign of what could have been had the past not gone the way it did.
I mean, to some of these planets, right, a resource abundant area is going to look like an Eden of some kind, I would imagine,
yeah, exactly.
Right? So you have the story that I'd be interested in telling in this particular instance, you know, is what would a hardcore capitalist do if he found Eden? He'd sell it, wouldn't he? Like, that's kind of what I would think. That's kind of where my brain goes. I don't imagine that these people would create or find something that is a lush paradise and then, you know, keep it and then offer it to the community, especially in a world that's kind of ravaged and resourceless.
I mean, I guess it depends on what group finds it, because I could also see like a ravaged and resourceless planet that probably doesn't have that many inhabitants. It might make the most sense to band together as like a set community that supports each other, because the alternative is just dying.
It almost seems like an episode of the Twilight Zone, doesn't it? Where it's like
yeah.
The post-apocalypse, and then a group of people find this place, and then it's all about the story that unfolds from there. You know, like what they do with it. What's the concept, essentially?
It reads is very a Dying Earth to me, and usually the Dying Earth stories that I've read have a weird menagerie of kind of styles mixed together, almost in the way that like an OSR game, like an old school revival D&D game, might have like gonzo settings mixed together, but they're all sort of in the past and sort of looking at powers that they don't understand that have been left behind. And it seems like this setting, you know, parts of it could be a Conan the Barbarian, you know, adventure under a starless sky, and then parts of it could be like, oh, you're in a noir space station, and you know that what's left or what's around you is as complex and like diverse as the galaxy, but it's actually restricted to the solar system.
Yeah, that is one thing I actually so I do tend to like that bit of Dying Earth fantasy. There are some places where they do it well, and there's some places they do it poorly. I think one of the things that I dislike about that type of stuff is when you're reading a book, and then it's like, and then they found a nuclear bomb, and it's like, okay, I'm like completely pulled out of it at that point. But I like the idea of there are remnants of technology that we might recognize. One thing that annoys me is when suddenly there's an Abrams tank, you know, when there was like previously no real hinting at before. I think Prince of Thorns does this, if I'm not mistaken. I remember like just getting to a point where there's suddenly a nuclear reactor, and I'm like, fuck this, I'm out. Like I'm so done with this setting. Like it was very frustrating for me.
I've seen it done well a couple of times. The one that comes to mind is Nnedi Okorafor's Who Fears Death, which is set in kind of this magical post-apocalyptic Africa. And at one point, the main character stumbles upon, I think it's like a cave, but there are all these like bits of technology, which is when you realize like, oh, this is post-apocalyptic kind of thing. But they don't really know exactly what they are. They don't, it's not like it's like an active nuclear reactor or something. It's just like junk that's been left behind, more or less.
I'm cool with junk. I'm cool. I think I'm cool with junk.
I mean, the best classic example I can think of is the Book of the Long Sun, which you don't really understand that the terminology being used refers to modern technology until you're partway through the book, because he tends to use archaic words to describe things, like deliberately archaic words that have fallen out of the language. And so he disguises the technology, but then you start to think about how it's being used and what it is. And you're like, oh, this is actually like some kind of laser gun. It's not some magical thing, but he does it in a very subtle way. And I think that's what's really cool.
Yeah.
Have I told you guys, I think I've recently uncovered why I personally dislike post-apocalyptic stories. I know this is a bit of a tangent, but I've come to a realization that recently. Have I discussed this with you at all?
I don't think so.
So I used to think I didn't like sci-fi or post-apocalyptic stories for a myriad of reasons. Recently, I've come to kind of understand, right, that it's a deeply personal thing for me when it comes to these stories. I have found that most post-apocalyptic literature tends to focus on the savage nature of humanity and the savage violence that everyone devolves into once certain things in humanity are taken or of civilization are taken away. And what that often translates to for me is the removal of hope, right? And I kind of came to this weird place with it because to some people, survival is hope enough, right? Where there's a potential to rebuild humanity. But I tend to find the bleakness for me, for some reason, when it comes to post-apocalyptic fiction, to be deeply personally upsetting. Because to me, the reason I read something like science fiction or something like fantasy is it is escapism, and it is a hopeful escapism, which is something that I'm interested in. And mind you, like, not everything I read has to be hopeful. Obviously, I love a good bleak tale, as Courtney can assure you. But with post-apocalyptic fiction in particular, it often feels as though it just devolves into misery porn, and often only highlights the worst parts of human nature. Like, those are the deepest themes. And I don't feel as though hope is among those themes comparatively.
I mean, I do think it depends on what you're reading or what game you're playing. One that comes to mind right away is Station 11, which I think is a bit more hopeful in its depiction of a post-apocalyptic sort of environment, and I would recommend that one. It's really good.
You think so?
As far as hopeful?
Yeah,
I would say so.
Because to me, right, like I don't want to go spoiling Station 11 here, but I don't really get hopeful from Station 11. I just get like, I don't get that aspect from what I've seen of it anyway. Maybe it changes or something like that. But
I mean, I'm talking about the book. I haven't seen the show.
Oh, see, I'm talking about the show.
Okay.
So
I haven't seen the show. I mean, the book is like, there's certainly bleakness to it because it takes place like before, during, and after a disaster that wipes out a huge amount of the human population. Spoilers, it's a global pandemic, very topical.
Oh yeah.
But there's, in like the after part, there's this focus on this band, this like basically entertainment troupe that travels around, which I think is, that in itself to me is kind of hopeful, because it shows that it's not just like pure survival, but they're bringing in art and culture and expression, and kind of holding on to that part of humanity.
I think the thing that I find frustrating with fiction like that is that, to me, it is, I don't know. It's something that I'm going to have to like really sit down and think a little bit more about, because it's always something that's bothered me about post-apocalyptic fiction is like, it always seems cruel. It always seems like it is also like weirdly like one particular viewpoint that gets put across, which is like, where is the actually, you know what? Avery Alder can probably tell us, because we've talked about this kind of thing with her. This idea of like a hopeful post-apocalyptic where it's setting where it's like, yeah, it's about community building. Like that's the kind of thing that I'm more interested in if we're going to be doing post-apocalypse stuff, right? Like, don't get me wrong, I love me a good like Mad Max and stuff like that, and that is, you know, somewhat bleak but also hopeful enough where I'm also just able to get lost in a lot of the world building and a lot of the fiction in general. But yeah,
it's funny. I find things like Star Trek to be more fantastical because, in my opinion, people are fundamentally evil and they have to try to be good. And so all the post-apocalypses that reveal that, I'm like, well, that makes sense, you know.
Oh, we are on the opposite ends of that spectrum, Daniel. Yeah.
I mean, when you look at like what's now going on in the world, if you look at like civil wars, you know, right now in Africa, and it's just, or Asia or the Middle East, it's just brutality. Like it's
but
horrific.
It's still the best we've ever been. No, it's still the best we've ever been. That's the thing.
I mean, the best in our shoes, as we are in like a Western country that isn't experiencing.
I'm talking globally. Like globally, this is the best we've ever been. Like in terms of peace, in terms of brutality, in terms of bloodshed. Like
I don't think we fundamentally changed at all since our creation.
Well, fundamentally, no. But like as a civilization, we've built a society to the point where it's like we have less over. Like I think of like the history that I have read, and it's like where all of this blatant, horrible like torture, like on a day-to-day basis, right? Like the idea that torture was so normalized that it was an event that people would go to for entertainment, right? We now have something like that in the form of the simulacra of, you know, like a video game or a movie or something like that. So that violent tendency is still within us, that urge is still within us, but we have still created enough that it's so not what it used to be. Like that's the thing that irks me. It's like, yes, brutality exists, but we're also the most peaceful we've ever been.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would disagree that the changes of civilization have made life on Earth much, much more pleasant than the past. I guess what I'm just pointing to is we're still fundamentally evil.
Yeah, and there's still a lot of horrible shit going on.
Yeah, no. When you say evil, do you mean greedy or selfish? Because I think that like, what are we defining as evil here?
Evil for me always means selfishness at the expense of another's welfare.
Okay, that's fair. If that's your definition of evil, then we can talk about that. Yeah,
I think it's reified in the most successful economic system in history, otherwise known as capitalism.
Yeah.
Right, but we can do better than that. That's the thing.
I hope so.
Like that's the thing is that if you give into this idea,
that's why Star Trek's a great concept.
Exactly. Yes, I don't think that's going to happen.
Like, I think all of the technological optimists, I think all the technological optimists are just optimists. Like, especially what's his name? Kurzweil, who believes that the singularity is going to happen soon, and all these lovely, you know, wonderful man-machine mergers, and there'll be peace. None of that's happening. None of that. I think we got more of a Dune situation where we're not even, the story's starting 20,000 years after an empire is established, and we're still shit. That's where we're headed.
Daniel, I have to imagine that there has to be a better future, because otherwise, like, what is the point of all of this, right? Like,
that's a good question. There is no point.
Well, yes, as a nihilist, I agree with that. However, I also understand that we have to assuage and try and lessen other people's suffering as much as possible, right? Like that is the hope that I bring towards the future, that our lives and other generations' lives will be kinder and less violent and less exploited than the lives that we are living now. right? That's the hope. And that is what I feel pulls me away from post-apocalyptic fiction, is that it strips that away. It tries to take away that hope, and it tries to say that the now that we have is what we should strive for. Post-apocalyptic fiction often feels very conservative to me politically as a result of that.
I wonder if that's how the genre would describe itself, or if that's kind of bad. If that feeling that you come away with is the result of post-apocalyptic fiction that's not writing to the expectations of the genre. Because I don't know much about post-apocalyptic fiction to say. But for example, like if you have a space opera, like I you kind of know what the expectations of the genre are, and then a bad space opera wouldn't fulfill those. So I wonder if like the majority of post-apocalyptic fiction is, like you're saying, like disaster porn, and the ones that are actually good have a message that post-apocalyptic fiction is really about. I don't know what that is. Maybe it is disaster porn, for all I know.
Yeah, that's a great point, Daniel. And we have strayed so far from this setting within this discussion. I as much as I would love to continue this discussion, I think that we should shelve this and get back to our setting. If you want to hear us talk about this more, if you want this to be its own subject, let us know, send us an email, or even for one of our patrons out there, if you want it to be an Aphid Lounge episode, by all means, let us know, because I think that there's a lot more that we can say about this type of thing. But regrettably, as much as I would like to continue on, it is time to continue on. We need to move on to our factions. Dear God, let's get this going. Daniel, start us off with your faction. What do you have for us, sir?
Since you all are particularly interested in the black hole, I was as well. I had an idea for a way to introduce time travel to some extent.
Interesting.
I imagined a organization that resides near where the effects of time dilation aren't too strong, near the black hole, called the Sagittarius Group, after the Sagittarius A star at the center of our own galaxy, which is a giant black hole. And the concept is they have a machine that sits. It's like a supercomputer that's left over from the previous civilization, and they've probably been there since this thing was launched. That sits as far as it can close to the event, like to the edge of the event horizon, so that it doesn't fall in, but it's getting maximal. What do you call it? Time dilation effect from it. But their station is further away, so they're not under those effects fully. And what they do is they're running some kind of computation inside of that time dilated space that would take thousands of years, because they don't have the technology to do it. And they have a way of sending agents to it, and they get more information. And then because they can't go back, because, if they were to, once they get there, time has passed too much because of the time dilation to return. Instead, they travel on across the event horizon into the black hole. And now this is where there's some more hand waving than normal going on. They pass through the black hole and are flung into the past, and where they can perhaps make some changes, or perhaps launch the rest of their mission.
Or the other reason that you would fling yourself back to the past is so you could fight the evil that is Aku.
What is that?
Oh, you've not seen Samurai Jack, Daniel?
No, it's a cartoon.
I haven't either, honestly. I've seen a couple episodes, but
didn't really like the animation.
We're going to move on because I don't know if our friendship could take this conversation. Daniel, continue on with your Sagittarius group, please.
So in terms of how this would work, like when you have a black hole, if it's not enormous meaning lots and lots of solar masses, and it's not rotating, then the singularity in it is such that you wouldn't be able to potentially pass through it. You'd just be annihilated. But if the black hole's large enough and rotating, it's possible that the singularity is a ring, and you could pass through it and not be spaghettified. And possibly, who knows what happens if that occurs. That's your window into the fantastical. So I'm guessing this particular black hole, because it was created experimentally and it contains more than the solar masses of the sun, is in some way special, and perhaps it has a ring, and that was part of how it was designed. So that's what these guys are exploiting, to travel into the past. And so from a narrative point of view, I'm thinking there might be these like Sagittarius agents throughout the system, some of whom are from the past or from the future, I guess, that are trying to put things in place to, I don't know, either reverse the disaster or some other objective. Like think like really mysterious special agents that are out there.
Interesting.
Daniel, the animation's the best part of the show. I don't understand.
It just looks kind of dumb to me.
I don't like it's so stylized and
like badly drawn.
Like the art is so like I can't.
They're all like kind of shrunk, and I don't know. I don't like the colors.
Are we talking about the right show?
Yeah, Daniel, it's like weird looking.
Courtney, take this away from me, please.
Yep. Okay, so we're moving on. All right, so this actually reminds me of a book that I finished recently called "This Is How You Lose the Time War." It's by Amal El-Mohtar and Max Gladstone, and it's about these two agents on opposing sides of a time war, as the title implies, who travel back and forth in time, like doing really minor tweaks to like vastly hopefully change the course of the future in favor of their side. So I could see the agents doing things like that, where they don't want to do anything too big and like just completely fuck everything up, but these like minor tweaks here and there to hopefully change the course of the future.
Is that the novel that uses time as if it were like a Git repo? Where like the way they describe the timeline is that it can be revised, and there's a central repository of time, essentially?
Kind of, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
A Git repo, for those unacquainted with it, in software, it's a way of tracking changes to the software, such that you can make little changes and go back in time and reset the history, so you can go back to earlier changes. And I think that book works with that concept, but it might be wrong.
It's sort of similar to that. It's like a very like poetic kind of abstract book, so there's a lot of sort of nebulous ideas in there. I really enjoyed it, but yeah, just made me think of that when I heard your idea here.
I've calmed down. I'm back. I apologize. I have a question, actually. Daniel, is there a way that you could essentially use like terminally ill people to in this kind of time loop thing? So it's like, we can give you more, like that's why like you're sending these people back who basically have no other option, or like we're going to send them on what are essentially suicide missions, right? Where it's like, hey, look, in this time dilated space, you're going to have a lot more time to live because of how time works. And then so like you just do a couple of missions for us, you tack on 10 to 15 more years or however many long years. Is that something that is feasible? Because I feel like that's kind of an interesting subgroup of people, like agents, that you could have that work within this group.
I mean, I think that's a fun idea, but it wouldn't work because even when you're time dilated, you still experience time as normal. So if you had a terminal disease, you would still have however much time you have. Like there's you wouldn't get any more time out of it.
Okay, because it's all about relativity, right?
Right. So like if let's say I'm working at Sagittarius Group Station and I'm up to go travel to the past, like I would travel whatever 1,000 meters or 1,000 miles to the machine that's heavily time dilated. But once I get there, you know, it's, I don't know, a few days have passed for me and it's now like day 7. On day 7, when I arrive, the time dilation is so great that the station I came from is now 1,000 years in the past.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, I still have only a year to live. Now I go through the event horizon and I don't come back. But I like that idea. So I wonder, because like you're suggesting, what would be the lore for an agent to want to do this mission? I don't know. Maybe it could be along your theme, recovering the past. Like maybe there's a chance that when they go through, they'll arrive before the black hole was created in the distant past, like before the prison existed. But then again, I don't want to take them out of the story. You know what I mean?
Right. Interesting. Okay. I think we should pivot over to Courtney's faction because we still have factions to get through. This episode is already running kind of long. So, Courtney, go ahead and hit us with your faction.
So I kind of have two factions, actually, that are in opposition in what they want to accomplish. The first one is pretty straightforward. A group of survivalists who, to be able to still survive on Earth, which when the sun dies will become this like frigid like wasteland of ice. They dug deep into the Earth's crust to attempt to stay alive closer to the heat from the Earth's core and geothermal vents and all that. So they now have a subterranean colony down there that's sort of separated from a lot that's on the surface. And in opposition to them would be a group of accelerationists who think that this solar system is just pure misery, that bringing new life into it is a terrible idea. Essentially that they want to snuff out the remaining human life to ensure that there can't be future generations who suffer, whether by weaponry or sterilization or what have you. But that's their goal.
Interesting.
Like reverse Morlocks.
Morlocks?
Like the ones who
time machine
the Earth. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
More hopeful ones, I guess.
Yeah. My question to you is, what kind of stories do you want to tell with these two groups? Is it all about their interpersonal conflicts or intrapersonal conflicts, or what do you think?
I think that, with the survivalists, definitely the survivalist aspect, the clinging on to hope that things can improve, that that they can still thrive underground. With the accelerationists, it's I guess how they deal within their own group with that concept, and also how other people interact with them, how they would try to thwart the plans that they have, and so on.
How do you imagine them stylistically? Like, if I were to visualize each group, like, are we talking about like Matrix 2 and 3 and 4 dancing minorities under the earth in their savage paradise, or are we talking like we've carved out Fallout 4 bunkers and we're eating beans?
I'm picturing not quite either one, I guess, for the underground people.
Those are the choices I gave you.
Yeah, just the two. That's it.
That's it.
I guess closer to like Fallout, not so much like underground rave parties, but I picture them as like very like working labor types who sort of toil underground.
So like dwarves?
Did Chris put you up to this, Courtney?
You could, if you wanted to, call them dwarf-like.
Yeah.
Are
they short because the gravity differences and
there's
higher pressure under the earth?
Shut the fuck up right now.
Maybe I could imagine that due to like poor nutrition over time and the gravity effects, that they would slowly shrink down.
And it's dark down there, so
Great, you got a bunch of people with rickets. What's your next fucking faction? Great.
But what about what about the accelerationists?
Yeah, tell us more about them, Courtney.
Those I have less of a grasp on.
Okay.
I feel like
they be elves.
Oh my God.
God damn it, Daniel.
They totally are elves. I think they would be like less physically organized together. I feel like they might be more spread out across the solar system, trying to work in whatever way that they can. Like maybe even your faction, Daniel, has some that have sort of infiltrated and are keeping an eye on things. Potentially maybe even looking to use that type of technology to wipe things out. But yeah, I don't have quite a grasp on them yet.
I wonder, because I'm trying to think, okay, it makes how you describe the people underground makes total sense. Like they're kind of living underneath the planet to protect themselves. The ones in above, like there's no light. So I wonder if they've evolved themselves in some way to exist in darkness, like, and to feed off of some other sort of energy. And that makes them like fundamentally inhuman or different now.
like pulling from sort of the radiation in space instead
from
of
gamma radiation.
Yes.
They're all Hulks.
Well, no, if they're all drawing from gamma radiation, doesn't that mean that they're all time dilated? So they're essentially immortal, which also means that they're tall and spindly and have names that all have apostrophes in them.
Mm-hmm,
yes.
So
lots of
high
vowels,
pointed ears because of the gravity pull.
Obviously.
Obviously.
I do, for some reason, I do picture them as being more effete, or a feminine,
Yeah, no, I could see that in that I think maybe it's because they're focused on more of this concepts rather than like the labor that's the focus of the survivalists. These ones are more like stealth agent types.
Mm-hmm.
It's so interesting because I definitely saw them more as a death cult. Because they're so focused on the idea of like accelerating the end. To me, they just look like a bunch of like nerd necromancers with like skull face paint and shit like that.
God, they're basically
goths. Oh my, no. They're goth elves. That's what they are. Yeah, I can get behind goth elves. Let me tell you.
Jeez, they're all Ravenloft.
Yes, exactly. Or they're old school drow, I suppose, right?
Oh yeah, drow. That'd be good. I can see drow. It kind of thinks, see, what's that? I think it's an RPG called The Spire or something. Or where it's like a giant tower full of drow trying to escape these horrible overlord elves.
I own that book. It is fantastic and full of amazing lore. Really? It's essentially the drow are a repressed underclass for the high elves who are like ethereal and magic. And it is a city that is built a mile high. Yeah. It's really cool.
I would the music from that.
The what now?
There's music tracks released to tabletop audio that come from
really
that setting. Yeah,
I did not know that. That's really
cool.
Yeah. All right. I think that we're down. So we've got Courtney's elves and dwarves. We've got Daniel's like time looping Sagittarius group. And then for me, I wanted to offer a kind of villainous group that you can that is universal, right? I wanted to go with, and my idea was you have a prison system, right? This is a solar system that is essentially being used as a prison. Well, do you really need wardens or guards for that? No. But I bet that there's probably a large group of people who figured out that they can pretend to be wardens and guards and then abuse the shit out of their own power. So I have the Rail Boys, not their actual name, but they essentially go around on that weird boomerang shaped thing that binds all the planets together. And they essentially extort or manipulate the people from each of the different planets to give them more things, make them more powerful. And I was like, okay, how can we make it so they have a modicum of power? And I think Courtney was the one who mentioned this, that when the sun went out, they had all of these, like each planet had their own source or ability to create something that was like a sun. And so my idea is that those false suns or mini suns or UV emitters or whatever they are attached to this giant apparatus, the giant boomerang looking thing. And as a result, they own and control those things. So if you don't want to pay them their fee, their tithe, they will literally just shut the sun out on you, on your side of the planet, So that is the concept that I wanted to run with. And also, I had this idea that they're kind of like Cockney, like just like railway men who are just kind of like brutish in some way. At least the lower level ones, I'm sure that there's some good ones out there or some more effete ones, as Daniel so suggested earlier. But that's kind of the concept that I was running with. And I was like, these are assholes of a universal nature. Like they could be anywhere.
I love that, and I love that they have found a way to control the energy sources that are left, like to extort people. What's the show with the British people, and it's got Cillian Murphy in it? Is it
Peaky Blinders?
Peaky Blinders.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's what they make you think of.
Oh, that totally works. Absolutely. Yeah. and well, we're in that show, it's like they have legitimate power through illegitimate means. Like it's kind of the opposite in this way. They have illegitimate power through legitimate means.
They're just bullshitters.
Yes.
I wonder if that's what happened to the Earth, since my kind of canon around the survivalists that was that they went underground to escape the harsh, frigid temperatures of the Earth's surface. Maybe that they had shut off the Earth's artificial sun or UV, whatever, at some point in the past.
Courtney, you want to know how I know that group is American?
How's that?
Listen to what you just said. Oh, you're going to shut off our sun? Well, we're going to bury ourselves underground and live there because of our freedoms.
I mean, it's a like, what else are they going to do? Just die?
COVID 2020.
Yeah, exactly. COVID 2030 coming to a town near you. Courtney, that your group are Americans now. That's just canon. I'm sorry. That's just what happened now. Anyway, yeah, I thought they'd be kind of fun to mess around with. I also like the idea that they're like uncultured fucks and they have like, you know what it is? The reason I have them as like Cockney bullshit artists in my head is because they're the droogs from A Clockwork Orange, but like they're like gang, they're like gang member bullies, but they just so happen to get into the police. Like that's exactly what happened to them.
Yeah, there's this bizarre, even though those characters from Clockwork are like complete psychopath, anarchist sort of characters, I could see them being like an authoritarian group as well, but totally disorganized, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, that's kind of interesting to think about as well, is this idea that like they're decentralized. So it's like your friends just came through for tribute. We already gave you tribute. What do you want? You know, like that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
That might be kind of interesting to play with. Yeah, that's kind of fun. Yeah.
To counter them too, I could see groups popping up that want to destroy that link between planets.
Oh yeah. And that's got to be a thing, right?
Yeah.
And now you have planetary independence fighters and stuff like that, where it's like, we don't want to be shackled to this apparatus where we're being held to, you know, like they're like trying to be like all libertad about it, but it's like, nah, you're just getting swindled by a bunch of dumbasses. Like that's kind of what's going on. Oh man, that's ridiculous. Okay. Yeah. Do we have any questions about the world, the faction, and everything else before we continue on?
I did want to, it's not a faction, but I wanted to introduce something that I thought was important from a world building perspective. In that I can see we have such a diverse type of peoples and civilizations across the solar system because it's been so fucked up, right? I wonder too, like, do we have something like post-humanism happening? So, like, I remember we ruled out aliens, right, in this setting, in the sense that they're outside the story if they exist at all. But I imagine in this setting, you know, you're talking about trillions of miles because of the distances involved. I could see people kind of having evolved into other things because of either cyberpunk stuff or, you know, weird environments. So you kind of have like other kind of humans, and people have forgotten like that they are human. You know, like you could have people who are like weird rock men or like weird mermaid dudes in an ammonia ocean because of all the weird post-human stuff going on. I think that would be cool to introduce as a concept.
So you didn't want aliens, but you're cool with rock men and mermaids.
Yeah, because they don't entail a whole civilization and course of history that would go with aliens. Like, you can easily explain the mermaid people as like, we took a small ship of population critical mass people, went to this planet, Titan or something. We fell in ammonia pools and got mutated. You know, like they're not a whole civilization, but it adds weird color to this weird setting.
Mm-hmm.
Regrettably, I can see what you're talking about here.
Yeah. No, I think it makes sense, especially with how different the solar system would be. Like, when the sun goes out, I mean, things are going to get really, really cold.
Get real weird.
Pretty relatively fast. And so I think that there would have to be a lot of adaptations to that.
All right. Here's what I'm thinking. When you say rockmen, you mean miners who are trapped in particular mining suits, and because they never leave, those suits basically take on the form of like, they gather a lot of dust and material, and so they look like rockmen. They're actually just people who are trapped in suits because the environment around them is so hostile.
That's certainly one way to look at it.
That's my interpretation.
I could also see actual men who have flesh that has been
calcified.
Has been purposefully genetically changed to survive on Pluto, and so they like don't have flesh anymore. They have some other kind of silicate material that helps them survive in this space, and it's been genetically passed on since the first post-human enhancement. So like we did this initially to survive, then we had children, and now our children have this as part of their DNA. That kind of weird shit.
I hear you. I'm just kind of curious as to like, we're not considering the lack of new resources either. So when you start talking about transhumanist stuff, it means that there is a real scavengers horde where it's like, if you want transhumanist stuff, the people who are like purely transhumanist or have like cybernetic enhancements and stuff like that, wouldn't you think that they'd have to be like the top 1% of the 1% because resources are so scarce?
It all depends on the state of the system before the disaster. Like if there were technologies out there that was a matter of like injecting yourself with something and they were meant for like cosmetic changes, I could see having taken a bunch of it in desperation, and then the only reason why it's perpetuated is because you survived and bred, and so it's been carried in your genes. So that wouldn't necessarily necessitate more technology or resources so much as just surviving an outcome and then evolving. So I'm not thinking these people, to answer your question, I don't think these people have like genetic libraries to choose from to pick and choose their enhancements. I'm thinking like this is the result of actual evolution. Like you survived and carried on this mutation, and now it's been 500 years, which really isn't enough for evolution, but we're just hand waving that. And it's changed you fundamentally. But maybe because it's artificial thing, it changes faster, right? So maybe it's like one of those gene therapies. It was meant for like, I don't know, putting a cool bejeweling on your flesh. And these people realized, oh, if we take everything in this pack of this rich person had and just inject it into our bodies, we can actually sustain more radiation. So they do that. The entire fucking crew does this. They're now like crystallized, but alive. They survive. Right. They have children. 500 years later, you've got rock people.
When you said that you wanted to like bejewel your skin and stuff like that, my brain immediately went to Disco Stu from The Simpsons, who has like the sequins on his jacket. But anyway, so I actually think that there is an interesting idea that we can kind of mess around with. Why not take this? Because you're right, you can't have evolution in 500 years. I mean, like you can have
you need millions, right?
Right.
But this is fantasy technology.
Hold on. Yes, Daniel.
I do like the idea of it being more about like. I do like the idea of it being more about mutation than evolution.
I agree. Like we can transform it into genuine evolution because we already have a giant black hole with time dilation.
Yeah, it's like, true. Oh,
you can essentially, so you can take your Sagittarius group, you can have like this offshoot of them be weird evolutionary biologists and be like, look, let's see what happens when we try and breed rockmen and then toss them into this time dilator. Yeah.
They could be partially behind it too. I like that.
Yes. So why not something like that, right? Why not an entire planet, probably Mercury, that is devoted entirely to this study because it's the closest to the black hole.
Yeah, so I got pulled in even closer. That's where the station is. The weird thing.
Yes. And so they're like, all right, they're basically trying to play Spore, but with like just this one plan to be like, all right, let's see what happens when we toss this. Let's try and make mermen. Let's see what happens. And they toss in the correct elements and then go from there. And then it's genuine evolution. And then you have like mer people and
Right.
golems and, you know, elves and dwarves like Courtney wants so bad.
I mean, they could produce them, push them through the event horizon, send them into the system sometime in the past, and now the reason why they exist in the system is because they were created in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Hate it. I really
fantastic.
I mean, it's kind of an okay idea. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty fun.
Sorry, I didn't mean to introduce a whole other faction, but I felt like I had to get that in there at some point.
No, it's definitely an interesting idea. Like, especially when you consider how drastically different the solar system would be and how near impossible it would be to survive at all. Like,
yeah,
I think it becomes necessary to have some sort of mutation at some point.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think it's a cool idea. Plus, like I said, you can tie them into your Sagittarius group really well. I mean, like it's all tightened in a little nice package and stuff, like Daniel. Exactly. Anyway, I think it's time that we move on. We have a main quest. What is the quest of the... Here's the thing. This setting is so vast and so everywhere, literally, goddamn everywhere in the solar system. We could do a lot of it. We could do a lot of things with it. What are we doing here? What exactly are we trying to do here? What's the story? What's the core story that we're trying to tell with this particular setting?
I mean, we could go back to our conversation about post-apocalyptic fiction and how you wish there was more hope in it. So what if it's a story of hope?
Okay. What's the story of hope then?
Yeah.
Good question.
It seems the setting suggests to us that, it suggests two things. There seems to be some idea of hope outside the system in our origins to where the people have gone. But I think the Star Trek version of that is there is a possibility of making this not a prison and making it a home. Because it's only a prison because we believe we can't escape it and that there's a need to escape it. But if that's the concern isn't there, then you already have a place to be.
So let's start here. What is the first step within the solar system of making it a home?
I would say making a new sun would be necessary for long-term survival.
Getting rid of the Droogs as well.
Yeah, them too. Fuck those guys.
I see both of those working as potential concepts. Which do we want to go with, or can we roll them into the same one?
I think we can do both because I think the antagonist can be the Droogs.
Yep.
You know, and the goal can be the sun recreation. They probably have something to do with that.
Okay, so if that's the case, then we can probably confidently say that the Droogs have the means to create a new sun, but actively choose not to in order to maintain power.
Yeah.
Or they just don't know how.
Like, or they don't know how. Yeah.
I think they don't know how.
Yeah.
That's kind of fun as well. I like both ideas.
They pretend that they do, but they don't actually know how.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I can support this. Okay. So let's start there. The mission is we've got to remove the Droogs from power. How do we do that, and who's involved here? Is it an interplanetary coalition, or is this just a plucky group of Plutonians, even though, not actually a planet, whatever.
Plucky.
That's why they're plucky, because they're trying to gain Plutonian status, or Pluto's status as a planet.
I think they restored it to planethood recently.
Oh, did they?
Did they?
I think so.
Huh.
I feel like I read that. God damn it.
Stupid
type is Pluto a planet again?
Stupid scientists.
Planet again. Let me just Google that real quick.
Wiki says it's a dwarf planet.
It's still a dwarf planet?
It's a dwarf, but it says not. Planet, not planetoid, right? Because I think okay, whatever.
Well, I think it got demoted to dwarf planet, so I don't think it has been restored.
But wait, I thought planetoid was lower than dwarf planet. Am I wrong?
I think, it's...
I don't know.
It is. I would say it's lower,
Yeah.
Because planetoid sounds like you're not even like a crumb, or you're barely a crumb.
You're bigger than an asteroid, I guess.
I don't know. Okay, whatever. We're losing the plot.
Wait, what was your question?
How to
is this an interplanetary coalition, Or is it something like a group of plucky Plutonians?
I vote plucky.
Yeah, I think it makes more sense in terms of keeping them organized. I think it would be tough to have people across each planet come to one thing.
Because you can't even talk to each other over those distances.
Yeah, you can barely communicate,
Yeah.
All right. Is it the dinosaur people who rise up?
Just rising up with dinosaurs.
I think okay, I'm thinking like Chrono Trigger. Like
God, yeah.
It starts with some small backwater place, right? You do pick up a dinosaur person at some point, as well as other neat, cool people, other posthumans, and maybe an agent.
You can literally have Frog, who's from the weird mutation bit. Yes. Okay, got that. And
robot guy.
You have robot. Yeah. Okay.
You pick up a vampire elf, just like Magus.
God damn it! Yeah,
it's Chrono Trigger.
So wait, we spent 2 episodes just to make Chrono Trigger.
We did, sure did.
Mm-hmm.
God damn it! We could have saved so much time. We were just like, for this setting,
that even has time travel.
Yeah, I know. So we could have saved so much time. Like for this episode, for this series, just go play Chrono Trigger. It'd be fine.
Lavos is the time dude in that game is the Sagittarius group where they get the ship from.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, Lavos is probably the one that we don't really have a good.
It's the black hole.
Yeah, I guess the black hole would make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and yet the future refused to change. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think that we're going to do better than that right now as an ending.
I think the Sagittarius group also has to be part of that villainy too. Maybe the Rail Boys seem to be the villain, but they're not the real villain.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Because they seem pretty bad. They're doing like genetic engineering and they're fucking with time.
Mm-hmm. They're making mermen, Daniel. Yeah.
They're making fucking mermen.
Horrifying.
That's horrible.
I agree. So, okay. I feel like we're at it. I feel like we've crescendoed here. I feel like we've come to the conclusion. No, am I wrong?
If we had more time, I think we could do more work.
Mm-hmm. I feel like the creation of the sun, given that the Sagittarius group are like the masterminds or whatever in this scenario, maybe it involves like exploding Mercury in some way and turning that into the new sun that then orbits the black hole.
We're creating lots of star planetoid bodies like that,
like mini little tiny suns everywhere.
Yeah.
That's
throughout the system. Because like if the star you need a really big star to give light to the whole solar system. But if you did like a few of them throughout the system, you might, for example, if Jupiter had more mass, it could become like a brown dwarf and then potentially a star. So we've lost little gas giants. So maybe part of their mission is like lighting the fires of all these planets to create enough light to illuminate the system again.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, kind of.
I'm picturing like an asteroid built of little tiny sun-like objects.
Yeah.
But the question then becomes, how do you infuse something that will give like a new sun that won't immediately burn out? Because power consumption is going to be a massive thing here.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, wait, what if we go back to the Mercury idea? Because it's closest to the event horizon because of time dilation, it's going to last for an exceedingly long time. Therefore, it can provide light for as long as the inhabitants need it. Does that make sense?
Okay,
so work because the time dilation, I don't think that would affect light itself.
Or is it? Would it be the other way around? Would it like burn out too fast if it's in there, or would it?
Well,
what is time again? What are we talking about?
So the things closest to the event horizon, that are on that space experience time normally, but from their perspective, more time has passed outside of where they are.
Okay. So I think it would work then. I mean, in a hypothetical sense.
I have to think about this.
Sort of, maybe.
So that'll do it for this episode of Worldbuild with us. remember that if you want us to build your world, you can always go to our website, worldbuildwithus.com, and submit a prompt. If you want to follow us on social media, we are over at Let's World Build. If you want to come join our Discord community, there's a link for that in the description. And again, I want to make sure that we all know there is a way that you can submit your questions and suggestions about previous worlds that we've built, and we will read them on future episodes. So I made that clear last time. I want to make it clear again because it's a new thing that we're trying out. A thing that is not new is our Patreon. So if you're feeling particularly generous and you want to give us money, go to our Patreon, click on the little button, and not only do you do nice things for us, but you also get exclusive patron content. That's fairly new as well. Always like to show that out. So with that's going to do it for this episode of World Build with Us. Remember that we love you very much, and we're going to get through this together. Until next week.